Is that the agenda item?
Are we getting punchy already? It's only just a little after.
That's what happens when you feed us.
It's the optical booze in this
Early.
Mr. Stoltz. Start recording.
It's nothing personal, Ed.
Governing Board President, Governing Board members, Cabinet, thank you for letting me have the opportunity to talk to you about. And today we're going to talk about the facilities planning process that we went through several years ago. As part of the process, in November of 2007, and this actually came out of, I believe, a Governing Board study session in August of 2007 for some time during the 2007 year to put this process into place. And in November of 2007, the direction given to the district was to establish a committee, gather input from staff and the community, to review research based upon different aspects of facilities and facility environments, to analyze our current facilities, and then to develop a blueprint for our future. So in November, the Governing Board presentation was given and the direction was received. From 2007, November to May of 2008, we conducted almost continuously, monthly, not only with the community as well as the committee, but with Physical Plant Services. They conducted facilities evaluation. In January 2008, the committee was developed. From February to March of 2008, we gathered input from the school sites and the community via meetings. From March to November of 2008, we developed standards by which we were going to look at the facilities and their conditions. And in December of 2008, we recommended standards for board approval that had come from the community, staff, and teachers. From December 2008 to March 2009, we continued to develop the master plan, and in April of 2009, we presented a draft plan to the Governing Board at a Governing Board meeting. Receiving input at that meeting, we went back, revised the master plan based upon that input, as well as some more staff input. And in May of 2009, came through with a recommendation on a district plan to the Governing Board. So to cover a little bit more in detail, the committee and meetings, the committee was made up of 56 different individuals. I wish I could say all 56 were at every meeting because they weren't. But over the course of the 18 months, we had 56 different people attending our meetings. These were made up of Governing Board members, principals, administrators, certified staff, classified staff, and community members. We held 16 meetings with the Facilities Committee between January 2008 and May 2009. 2 Governing Board studies, study sessions, 3 staff meetings, North, South, and Central. And what I mean by that is you had one at Squaw Peak, one at LCK, and one at Excellencia. And then we also held 2 community meetings where the entire process was put out, as well as the recommendations, one at Excellencia and one at Biltmore Preparatory Academy. We reviewed research on how facilities support learning and achievement. We took a look at urban studies that's actually studied urban school districts and their facilities. We looked at the demographics within our district. We studied whether our demographics in an urban environment led to K-6 schools, K-5 schools, middle schools, or whether K-8 schools were good for our purpose. We reviewed the capacity studies to determine our site capacities, and as you know, at that time, we had one SFB school, which was Excellencia. So it was the capacity study done for it. The formulas used for a SFB school are different than a non-SFB school. Since then, I believe, 2 years ago, it changed. So the same formula now has to be used for all schools. So SFB now, if we use school facilities board monies, then we had to do the capacity study based upon a specific formula dictated by them, which actually lowers the amount of square footage required by a student, so raises the capacity of students within a building. whereas the older buildings didn't have that requirement on them in 2007-8. I'm sorry?
I think it was also the study when we had Excellencia, we can do the area, but then when it changed, it went district. They
Right.
looked at the whole district.
We gathered data from all the school sites through not only site surveys done by PPS, but the facilities condition. The committee itself actually did some site surveys and actually going out to the sites as well. Develop guidelines for facility improvements based on input and research to provide for direction for the future. And we analyzed each site and developed recommendations. That capacity study really told us an awful lot. We had some schools that we had more students than the capacity held. We had some schools that we didn't come close to the capacity dictated by the study. At the same time, the study also, the formulas don't base upon whether a bathroom is included or not. So it goes off of square footage. So sometimes we have spaces, and by the use of our environment, sometimes we have more students, or what happened most often was we had less students in the square footage required by the state. The enrollment analysis, we looked at the last 10 years worth of enrollment. We saw at that time, obviously, starting in 2003, we started losing enrollment. So in 2007, 8, and 9, we were still in the decline of enrollment. That had some impact on whether a school was at capacity or not, or whether we even felt that the school was going to be at capacity in the next 3 to 5 years. We gathered data on out-of-district and out-of-attendance enrollment data. So how many students did we have coming in from outside the district? How many students did we have within our district that were not attending the school of attendance, but actually going to another school within our district? So that also had impact on telling us whether certain schools were preferred within the district or not. And then we gathered data regarding our competition, which included our fellow districts, Madison, Scottsdale, but it also included some of our charter schools within the district as well, and we took those into consideration. Conducted facilities analysis through site walkthroughs. And when we looked at the facility analysis, we looked at everything from parking lots to roofs to windows to technology, to the number of technology drops, to the number of wireless drops, phone lines, condition of the wiring within the walls. I mean, we looked at almost everything you have to look at a facility to determine what its future could or could not be for. Obviously, with technology changing almost every other week, it's hard to really dictate, but we did look at how many of our sites had full wireless capability, how many of our campus had 5 to 7 drops in each classroom for computers, how many didn't. So all of that came into play when we were looking at the condition of our facilities. We reviewed the research on the facility standards. Again, gathered data from the site, staff, and the community through those meetings that we held. We've reviewed the research on school size and configurations, developed district standards for the school facilities, and developed the master plan for our recommendation back to the board. And an awful lot of this was done in preparation for the possibility of having a bond. And I believe that that was one of the whole reasons for doing this, was to ensure that we had our ducks in a row prior to getting to a bond request. Go ahead. Through the use of the facility analysis, the program needs, we looked at which sites had preschool, which sites didn't have preschool, which sites had special ed classes, VE classes, what sites had, literally even looked at the fact of what sites had baseball or football teams. Taking all of that into consideration with the program needs, the enrollment data, district standards, competition implications of what we felt was going to happen at some of our competition with our charter schools. And then we included in what was just handed out to you, recommendations for each site and the rationale for that recommendation. An awful lot of our recommendations came about based upon the fact that over the last 50 years, our buildings have been, and I mean the best way to say it is piecemeal. And so an awful lot of times when you look at the situation where you can refurbish a school or rebuild certain parts of it or add certain buildings and so forth, we had been doing that for 50 years and was the reason for an awful lot of our facilities being in the conditions that they were. On a campus that has 1950 buildings, 1985 buildings, 1994 buildings, and 2002 portables. So when you start looking at all of that, that's why the recommendations were put together that are in front of you right now.
Can I ask a question? I know Gateway School was new because I was the first teacher there, like the first art teacher. So that was what,
1998.
98. So this was in 2009, so at that point Gateway School was only 11 years old, which, I don't know, I've always lived in old houses. My house, my current house is 75 years old, my other one was 95 years old. So I'm thinking 11 years, why would you want to renovate a school already?
I'd have to look at that.
This document that was passed out
I'm-
assumed multiple bond issues and elections. So right now, since this has been done, we've done one bond, and the board authorized the sale of the second half of that authorization. This probably is another
25 years.
25 years away before we get to renovating Gateway, Excellencia, and Compass Center, and probably the last one on the list would now be Papago.
Right.
So,
There's 5 to 7 years between each one of these bond processes.
Okay.
So you're looking at a minimum of 25 to 35 years before we would get down to that bond 5. Okay. And as I stated, due to the multiple decades of piecemealing, we can no longer effectively support some of our infrastructure and some of our resources at our schools. Security is challenging in such an environment when you've got, let's take LCK for example, and you've got buildings spread from literally one end of that piece of property to the other. Think about the security issues with doors opening to the outside. Classes connected to each other, which was great at the time, but now also something we have to think about when we start talking about security. The space properly being utilized, whether it's efficient or not efficient, and environmental systems that are inefficient and unsupportable. And as we move down that road of trying to become green, trying to be more effective and efficient, and more importantly, to be more fiscally responsible, we have to look at all of
And while you're changing slides, when a lot of our school buildings were built in kind of the military barrack style, if you will, we didn't have air conditioning in them. We had swamp coolers, and they were built that way with the opening, every door opening to the outside, presumably because you have to vent
Correct.
swamp coolers. And they had, of course, we didn't start until after Labor Day in those days, and we had the long overhangs and lots of grass, so that helped to keep the campus cool. But just to get into this, our needs have changed significantly in the last 60 years since a lot of them have been built. So I think that was part of why we did this.
Right, as a former student of Papago myself, the doors and windows were always open, especially during the summertime or at the two ends of the school year, because that's how we kept the class in school.
Another issue that we discussed at the time was, and Tiffany was on the board before me, so she may remember some of this better than me, but when there is a lockdown, that had mentioned security, but when there's a lockdown, students can't go from class to class in the current structure, but at a school like Excellencia or Gateway, they could, presumably.
If it's an external lockdown where the reason you've locked down is external to the building, absolutely. Obviously, if it's internal to the building, you would handle it just like you would on the other ones. But on all the other ones where all the doors open to the outside, a lockdown is a lockdown is a lockdown.
So that could interrupt learning. Thanks.
As lockdowns usually do.
Yeah, that's true.
It's hard to learn when you're at a desk.
Any questions on the process we used and how we got from point A to point B? The committee spent an awful lot of time, like I said, 16 meetings 56 different people, and an awful lot of those people, I'm gonna say 12 to 18 people were there at almost every meeting. Whether it be a walkthrough, a community meeting, or a school board meeting. They did an awful lot of work, they looked at an awful lot of studies, they looked at an awful lot of data, and really put an awful lot of effort into making sure that this really was sufficient and effective, validated that we could provide to the governing board.
Okay, no questions? So let's have the other presentation there.
Governing Board President, Governing Board. Dr. Jim, Dr. Charlotte. I'm here to talk about maintenance today. It hinges with the 20-year plan. I'm going to take you back a little bit on the maintenance plan itself. I'm going to take you back to 1999 when it actually started getting rolling. Prior to that, 1997-98, 7 districts actually put a lawsuit together to go against the state because we weren't getting funding to keep our buildings and our classrooms clean and upkept the way they're supposed to for children and teachers to teach. So the schools won the case. And in 1999 is when it started, where it came to the schools. I was involved along with grants, Pam's department, and there was much paperwork to go through, much reading to understand what we needed to do to get the grant monies, to be able to follow what they called at that time Students First, is the first name of the upgrading of schools to a specific equal standard across the board. And in doing this, the state selected several trades and crafts and engineers to come out and to look at the schools individually, all districts individually. And what I mean by that is they had plumbers, they had carpenters, they had electricians, they had masons, they had roofers. They had them all come out and I'd visit with myself and my staff. We'd have to walk with them from school to school, classroom to classroom, walk the buildings, open all the closets, look at all the plumbing chases. I mean, we basically should have had like x-rays to look at everything. And we went through everything. We went through the billing envelope. We went through special systems. We went through operating systems. We went through billing surfaces, which means carpet, tile, concrete, paving, all that kind of stuff outside. We went to special systems, which was like technology, computer, wired computer, Cat5 cable, whatever was needed at that time. So it was very extensive. You got it, Rick? Okay.
I'm doing it.
No. And then doing all that, you're one ahead of me here.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to figure out.
To wrap all that up, but what happened was we took all this information after we filled all the paperwork out. We had to go back and we had to sit with the state Students First, myself, and whoever went with Creighton, usually was the superintendent, myself, and assistant superintendent at times, or even Pam was there many times. We discussed everything that we inspected, so they can understand and we can understand where we were going and what we needed and what we expected to get from them. After we did that review, we actually had to go back out again because we didn't agree on some stuff. I'll give you an example. Air conditionings, they didn't want to allow us to have air conditioning rooftop units. Our rooftop units in that 1999 were already 18 to 20 years old. They were already failing. We were putting much money into them to keep them running. The other big subject was bathrooms. Our bathrooms in a lot of our schools were just unacceptable. You couldn't keep them clean. They were leaking. The walls were peeling. tile off the floors and off the walls, such as that. So we had to refill paperwork back out, get the inspectors back out to look at all that again, go back in, present our case, and luckily Creighton won that case. We got everything that we wanted and everything that we inspected, and the projects started in 2001. What occurred out of all of this is checks and balances. The state was putting, I think they estimated 800 million at the time. But when they got done with the whole state of Arizona, it was $1,500 million to bring every school up to a standard. They wanted to reassure that the monies that they put in these schools was going to be maintained. So to do this, most schools didn't have a preventative maintenance program, any kind of maintenance program. We did. We had one in place, a small program that we go out and we check air conditionings, we check roofs, we check some of the stuff that we're supposed to. So what SFB did is they asked all districts, which I remember were about 8 of them, that actually had a preventive maintenance program, to turn in their programs and come and sit with them. They selected 17 maintenance personnel and engineers to come down to create what they called a preventive maintenance program. We sat there, we had many meetings. I think this went on for almost 8 months to create a maintenance program, so we'd have checks and balances. We can go out and we make sure that the roofs, scuppers were cleaned and the roof was drained and the air conditioner filters were changed and there weren't trees growing on the roofs and all the stuff that they brought up and seen throughout the years. We went through all major building systems and we put a program together to be able to check all those systems either quarterly, every 6 months, or 3/4, or annually, because certain systems you don't have to look at for a year. Some systems you have to look at quarterly, some only half. So we put that together. Items to be inspected. We also sat down, we did life cycles. Most of our buildings, you have to have life cycles. Like a carpet in this room, not in this room, but in a classroom, life cycle of a carpet is like 10 years. You go to a life cycle in a kindergarten classroom, you're lucky to maybe get 5 or 6 years out of it. So we had different variations of life cycles. Life cycles, the air conditioners on the roofs, just like we changed out of Gateway. The life cycle is 10 to 20 years. And we went through all that. We completed and analyzed all the worksheets, put all of them together, and it became a preventive maintenance program. And up to this day today, that program is still in place. And I have a copy of it to show if you want to see it. What it is every year we go through all those checks, quarters, 6 months, and every year. We have full checklist. I've got a book in the back. You can see it if you want to. It's very thick. And then we have to turn that report in to the superintendent. Then the superintendent and I go through it if there's questions. And then the superintendent takes it to the board president. And the board president sits down, looks at it, and if there's any questions there, we talk about it. And then I have to turn it into the state because it's a state statute that has to be turned in by law every year, once a year. As we were going through that, as I was saying, we were doing the life cycle plan. The life cycle plan included at that time roofs, exterior paint, interior paint, flooring, HVAC, and now as it was a living document, as the time went on, we started creating this, more stuff was added to it. And life cycles tell us, okay, when it's time to take something and replace it. It's just like an automobile. If you drive an automobile long enough, after about 10 years, you're going to start putting money into it, and it's not worth it anymore, so you sell it and you get a car, newer car, or a new car, and then you got a warranty, and your life cycle starts all over again. Then along came energy savings plan, facilities replacements and programs for energy efficiency. This started probably, I could guess, about 6 to 7 years ago. SRP and APS put rebate replacement programs in place. And the idea behind it was to save energy. Their thought was, is if we can, a kilowatt hour that's not created is a kilowatt hour saved instead of making a new kilowatt. Which means that when you replace something, you get the newest, latest, and greatest energy efficient unit that you can to save money of your kilowatt on your monthly bill. And it's just like we did it, I'll go back to Gateway again, because that's one of the biggest ones we've just did. We replaced 81 units there. They were SEER 10, which were low energy grade. We now have SEER 15, the highest grade of energy on an air package that you can buy today. So I'm kind of excited because I'm going to be watching the bills from the back year up to the front year to see what our actual savings are going to be. So I'm excited about all these replacements. EMS system, that's energy management system. We have 3 of them now. We replaced the one at Excellencia this summer also. It was old, antiquated, couldn't get parts for it anymore. So now, again, we got the latest and greatest put in there. And this new unit we're putting in is supposed to help us also save energy. Programmable thermostats, just like you have on a wall there, but we have newer ones than that every time one goes down, we put the newest one in again. AC timers. In our older buildings, it's hard to instill technology into it, so the best way to try to save energy is we have the old, what I call them, the old pool timers. They're manual, they're electric, but you set them, they go off on weekend, they come on Monday at 5 o'clock in the morning, they go off at 6 o'clock in the evening. They're great. We save money just by shutdowns. And then talk about shutdown, summer shutdown. We just got through summer shutdown. I'll be looking at the bills to see what kind of savings in kilowatt hours that we had this summer. We had quite a few programs going on, so it won't be as good as last year, but again, it's a savings. I always look at how to save a dollar. And then the other thing is waterless urinals. It's not electricity, but we still have to report energy to the state of what we're doing to try to save energy. And our district right now is 90% waterless urinals. So every waterless urinal you put in, they say saves 50,000 gallons of water a year. And we have probably over 300 of them, so it's a lot of water. And then on the bottom we have SRP, APS rebates. All that I just talked about there is their rebate program. And just to give you an example, I'm not sure what the number is yet, but the air conditioners that we replaced at Gateway, since we did the SEER 15, the most energy efficient package that we could put on a roof, we should get back about a $36,000 check. The EMS system that we put in over at Excellencia, we should get back $6,000 or $7,000 rebate back because we did indeed use the best energy efficient systems that we could put in. And then just combine everything, overall maintenance plans, a combination of everything we talked about. We have preventive maintenance, we have life cycle, we have energy savings, we have staff training and planning. That's to teach them how to do what they need to do in their jobs to save energy, or if they see something that needs to be changed that we know that we can save energy, they get training for that. I have annual budgets, department, capital, bond. That's all under my realm and physical plant to maintain all that. This year we did probably 22 jobs out there ranging from roofs to parking lots to carpet to tile, anything to do with the facilities, to upgrade our facilities so the kids have a nice place to go to and the teachers have a good place to teach. You get a chance, go around, look at Gateway Kitchen, go look at Loma Linda Eating Room, Creighton Eating Room, and Mackin Eating Room. Those have all been repainted, brand new tile on the floors, new moldings, everything looks really state of the art, nice and clean, ready for school. Huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. The biggest, one of the biggest other big jobs was the Creighton School itself. We repainted that whole school, all the buildings from top to bottom. Looks, to me, it looks great. It looks clean.
Yeah, because I just rode by it this morning on the bike.
And we in maintenance and we in the staff try to keep a consistency so we don't have to stock a lot of stuff. So when you look at Creighton School, it'll look same color code as Compass Center, same color code as Gateway, same color code as Excellencia. And it really brought it out. It made what we call it maintenance, it pops. And then on top of that, we have additional maintenance items. We do daily work orders. We do walk-arounds. Also, on top of all that, we as a district have to report to the state every year, and it'll be coming up starting this September, 9/1. We have to report capital plan. And then 9/1 also, we have to report square footage changes. 9/1, we have to report square footage relocations. 9/1, we have to report new square footages, if we have any. Also renovation and actual expenditures to renovations. 10/15, we have to report guaranteed energy savings that we did, and just stuff like this, I'll have to put in that report that we indeed did save energy and we're continuing to save energy. On 10/15 also, we have a report of new school facilities fund expenditures, and that won't usually, because of our declining enrollment, that's a 000. Preventative maintenance, as we talked about, that's that book in the back there, and a report that I have to turn in to the superintendent and the president of the board. And then finally, we have a 3-year building renewal plan that we keep continually running 3 years and 3 years and 3 years out. It used to be a 5-year. And the 17 of us that were on the preventative maintenance plan, we also helped build and create this 3-year renewal plan too. But the last 4 years, we haven't got much money out of that, like 0. Also under physical plant, in the maintenance plan, I am a certified Class A for underground storage tanks. I have to maintain and watch that with ADEQ. They come out at any time, do inspections, and I have to comply. And I'm also an inspector and a manager certified for asbestos. So anytime we have any removals or anything going on in the schools, I work with ADEQ, and all the other state agencies come out. And we have to do inspections. I have to turn in every 3 years, every 6 months I have to do inspections. And we just have to comply to that because that's a big one there. So I'm the LAA on that one too. So
With ADEQ, were you referring to underground wastewater storage?
now ADEQ, your air quality, Department of Air Quality, they are the ones that monitor all the storages underground for pollutants. They're the ones that monitor asbestos for getting into the air, pollution in the air. They're the ones that monitor for molds. All that stuff that we do, and something happens, we have to be responsible and reliable for it. And we need to know how to contain it, we need to know how to dispose of it, and all that stuff that goes with it.
So that would be anything that's leaked from neighboring dry cleaners or from neighboring, anything that's in the ground or anywhere.
Anything that is within our property boundaries, we're responsible for, no matter where it comes from, believe it or not. We are in good shape. We just had the ADEQ come out a month and a half ago. We went through all our underground storage tanks, they checked the nozzles, they checked the fire systems, they checked all the pump holes. There was a couple of things that we had to repair, and since we're in good shape, and we're one of the few districts that have a Class A, Class B, and Class C already registered with the state. I'm the Class A. Maria over in transportation, she's a Class B. She went through a special training for Class B. Class A had to go through all the trainings, and then our 2 Class C individuals are the mechanics in there. They're the ones that come out and they stick the tanks and they make sure there's no water in tanks and make sure all the pump holes don't have water. If there's something that goes on, they report it to either the Class B or Class A so we can hurry up and take care of it so we stay in compliance. Questions? If you want to see any of the reports or any of the paperwork or anything that we've done that I've talked about, it was like the Students First, which is now the SFB. Our school was privileged. We got in repairs and renovations. We got $15,237,000 out of that, so we did good. And when we were doing Ed's presentation, I took a lot of the reports that we did here because they were prior to going through the 20-year plan. And I was using some of those reports because we already did a lot of that inspection way ahead, not knowing we were going to do the 20-year plan. So that helped a lot when we did our walk-arounds. It was a refresher and say, oh yeah, I remember this and that, because they didn't give us everything. I tried to fight like plumbing. Come on, we got 45, 50-year-old plumbing in the walls. You're going to tell me that you can't replace that for us? It's not failing, it's not leaking. Look down the plumbing chase, the pipes look good, but never on the inside is it good. It's stuff like that, but that's what's happening now. These buildings are getting at the age where our drain systems from our urinals and our underground toilets and sewers and all that, they're really starting to fail. So every time something happens, we go in and we get it running, keep the school going.
So, Roy, if talking about plumbing and things like that, when we redo an old facility, and like we just did with Papago and maybe we'll be doing with Mackin, does that mean that all the plumbing, well, obviously the plumbing inside the building, because it's leveled, if we level it to the ground like we did with Papago, that means there's all new plumbing, but does that include right up to where it hooks up to?
Right to the city
sewers?
street.
Okay.
Papago, we actually dug down when we did the demolition over there. It was pretty tedious. We had some big footers and stuff, but all the underground electrical, all the underground plumbing, sewers, everything that was underground, we actually raked out with a D9 cat. Made sure the ground was all clean, and then we compacted it back so we had a fresh start from the city back in. All brand new.
And one other question is, we are looking at renovating and or replacing buildings, and our facilities plan is renovate/replace for most of these except for the newer ones. And I would assume we're going to go with replacing with most of these in the end. But are there any that would have some sort of historic value or some reason that we can't tear down? And I would tend to think, for example, this building right here, we can't.
This building is actually registered as a historical building. We have no other building that I know of in the district that's registered as historical, and that's a whole different rule section that you have to follow.
Okay, so that's pretty much just this building then.
Yes. We do have the older buildings. The oldest set of finger wings, I call them finger wings, or military barracks, as you stated, is in Creighton itself, and those are the three in the middle there. They're 1935. That's our oldest, other than this building.
Almost 80 years old.
Yeah.
Questions, comments? Is that the is that all as far as the presentations?
It is, and I think the relevance to all of this, actually multiple levels, but it also has relevance to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we also have in here, and we can't go to the next agenda item until 2 o'clock. But you might want to take a look through the history of some of our campuses. William T. Mackin is the next one up. And that's part of why we put this on here, was with the sale of the $22 million bonds, which has that been completed now? Or is that?
We have not, those bonds have not been sold yet. We're kind of waiting to see where the board wanted to go.
Okay, so we can't vote on things because nothing's an action item today, but we certainly can have discussion. And
So I have a question item from the last time we saw these two topics on the agenda. We were foreshadowing today's meeting. the conversation was to get a better handle on actually what the priorities are outside of the facilities plan that was created by the very hardworking committee of 56 members several years ago. In that we had conversations around whether or not renovation of an entire facility was the best use of the limited resources that we had, given the number of sites that had pretty significant issues, either potentially safety issues that could turn into safety issues for students and or the adults in the building. And so I thought we were also going to get today something that was more of a updated sort of punch list maybe about what our options are. Because obviously the option to renovate means we get to do one school and we'll eat up a significant amount of the funds that we have versus a punch list of here are the highest priority items across all of the remaining schools that haven't had any work done, and then having the board maybe see what makes the most sense in terms of addressing the needs of our schools.
Roy has a binder that
Is that
has
that
the,
ginormous thing in the back?
well, no, it's a smaller one, that where we've gone through and we've looked at it. But in general, we have, I think at the last meeting, the Mac and Bailey came up and the issues happening over there with rodents. And then on each of our campuses, not each, but on many of our campuses, we have, let me back up for a second and say that health and safety issues are addressed every year through the capital plan and through the remaining bond fund. So anything that is significantly a problem, those are addressed above all else on a yearly basis.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of actual building projects on each campus, in general, you have a few situations, many situations where we put portables, not portables, modular buildings on those campuses. The north end of Kennedy.
Yeah, those are portables.
Yeah, well, we
There's a
made,
difference, there is a big difference, portables, modular.
then we have, you have them at Biltmore Prep, that part of the building, currently being used, I believe, by Little Big Mines. We have them at Monte Vista, we have them, one at Creighton, we have at Loma Linda. So all of those buildings throughout the district, those would be priority on those campuses for sure. They're old,
Those are modulars, or those are,
well,
Well, you have.
I call them modulars. They were actually prefabricated. Some of them were actually prefabricated, put in place. They had wood floors. Over the years, we've renovated them.
The newer ones are called modulars, and what a modular, the difference between a modular and a portable, like Dr. Bogner said, is they come in wooden floors, they strap them together. Now, a modular is an actual building put in place. The slab's already there, all the plumbing and everything, underground sewers ready to go, and then they drop a already prefab building on top of it and they put it together. So it's substantially better than a portable, but we have some nasty portables.
And then we have at least 2 campuses that are have multi-purpose rooms that I would say that are below the standard of the majority of the schools. And that would be Biltmore Prep and Monte Vista.
Correct.
So those 2 would probably be areas that we would look at. And I'll let Roy take it from there.
And what we did is we were trying to get ahead of the curve, as we usually do, is we knew bond was coming up. We didn't know if it was 22, we didn't know if it was 7 or whatever. So I again went out and I could pass this book around so everybody can look at it. And I talked to the principals, I talked to the office managers, I talked to my staff and said, okay, what is really bad? I mean, bad, life, health, and safety first. And then after that, what else do we need? And like Dr. Bogner was saying, Mike Madison, the principal, wanted, I need a multi-purpose room because mine doesn't function. And Faith, BP said, yeah, I'd like to have a multi-purpose room. And there are other stuff in here that really needed, like the next board meeting coming up, Ed and I will be sharing with you intercom system. Our intercom systems, even though through the SFB was replaced, some of them are missed. Like I said, they didn't want to replace everything. So safety, life and health and safety, we need our intercom systems. We need our fire alarm systems. We need our security systems. We need our security cameras, all of that stuff to keep us, our teachers, and our students safe so we can keep a finger on things that's going on. So we create a list, life and health and safety, and I'll just go through a little bit real quick. Of course, like Creighton, we have a fire alarm. Security, we have some fencing at Creighton. This, we were looking at the $7 million first, if we were to get that, because we didn't know about the $22 million. We have a lot of front door compliance that are out of compliance, ADA compliance, which I'm talking about for our physically challenged people. Some of gateway front office renovation for security. What we did is Cabinet granted me to get an architect, sit with an architect. We had a couple of renderings already of how to make all of our front offices, including district office, secure and safe, just in case stranger danger come in. So that's a project I'll be taking on as soon as school starts here, so we can start right there for life, health, and safety and security. We had the Bailey wing was one in here. A bathroom plumbing that I mentioned to you. We have several bathrooms throughout our district that the plumbing trees are failing. I'm getting sewage leaking. We have to tear the walls out. I got plumbing leaking behind the walls. Several cases of that's going on. Security gates, and I can go on and on and on. But we all looked at life safety first. I tried to get a cost. The most everything going on. The book is broke up by the campuses, but that's why we're here today.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Since the $22 million is in hand right now, and the $7 million is not, but it's up to the board. We can look at all this and see which way you want to go, or a whole school to see what school to choose, because that 20-year plan was a living document. So as we review it, it'll be up to you folks to tell us what to do.
Hildy, somehow, I don't know how, but we misinterpreted the communication. So what we'll do is we'll actually put together school by school, kind of those priorities, starting with buildings, and we'll make sure that every board member gets that. The other thing to keep in mind is we talked about those buildings that we replace. Almost every one of our parking situations and our drop-off situations are difficult. I don't know if you've been up at Biltmore Prep and watched that. We've been through several different ways of trying to make that work and make it safe. But they were all built at a time when parents weren't dropping their children off. Yeah, and so that would be a priority as well, almost on every campus. In addition, because of the times in which these buildings were built, we have throughout the district classrooms. The standard is 900 square feet. We have classrooms that are well below that, 800 or even smaller square feet. That's a little tougher because those are classrooms within a building as opposed to an entire building that would be that way. But those would also be priorities. But we will go ahead and we will put together a list of priorities by school in terms of those most needy circumstances so that the board has those.
And our smallest square footage in a classroom is 780. And our standard now is 900.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think for me, what I want to be mindful of is it's wonderful to have an entirely brand new campus. I mean, Papago is beautiful, obviously. I mean, so you walk onto that campus and it's gorgeous, and everybody would love their campus to be rebuilt. However, given the realities of what we have in terms of funding and resources and the environment to go out and ask for more bond funds in the future, and the fact that that is not a guaranteed source of income to the district, I also want to be mindful of what is it that needs to be done that we can address and try to, you know, spread the wealth a little bit if that's the best use of our resources. And if it's not, and the recommendation from staff is, you know, we really should rebuild Mackin or another entire school because that's the best use. Now, I'd like actually not, in addition to the punch list or, you know, the prioritization, you've been on every campus, having done the site surveys and all of the different, you know, work with the different campuses. I'd actually like your recommendation. Now, we can certainly choose not to follow your recommendation as a board if we go that way, but, you know, not having been on every single campus doing the extensive review that you have, I'd like at least that perspective as well, not just here are the most pressing and priority items, but in my professional opinion, having run the facilities of the district for a long time.
14 years.
I was just going to say a long time, but 14 years, you know, what is it that you think is in the best interest of the teachers and students in all of our buildings?
Sure. Can I share the draft with them, or
Sure.
we did a draft list?
And, you know, really, it comes down to this question. First of all, these buildings were not built for today's environment, today's student, right? So everything we have in these buildings has been retrofit to work, from the technology to, I mean, they weren't built to handle somebody having a microwave in their classroom or other electrical devices in their classroom. They couldn't handle that kind of load. So there, from that perspective, the question really becomes what's unworkable, what's really unmanageable? Because probably Roy, and I've watched him do this, and his team, they're able to, you know, they're great with duct tape. I mean, they're able to make things
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
work.
I need a Roy at my house, so
They
Roy,
need-
you're-
when Papago was torn down, they even got the locks and the lighting and all of those pieces and are reusing them to replace at other schools. So they can make things work for a long time. The question is, what kind of environment do we want for our kids long term? And it is an uncertainty with the funding. There's no doubt about that. We have $22 million in bonds that are available to us now. You know, the next time we go out, which will be quite a few years from now, will the community be supportive of whatever our capacity is at that time to get bonds and possibly go on to the third phase of this. So that's always going to be a question for anybody, but we certainly can do that and make sure you have recommendations.
At this point, we don't know because we're not professional contractors who tear down and rebuild schools, but comparing the cost of tearing down and rebuilding Mackin to the cost of tearing down and rebuilding Papago, I know that Mackin is today a smaller campus. But we also might not get as good of a deal as the economy and construction has picked up as we might have a few years ago. So I'm just trying to think, it's not going to take $22 million to redo Mackin. So we have a few million left over for
Other projects.
other projects. That list of $6.5 million in front of me, but
That's what we did, and that's how we broke it up in the first sale of
Yeah.
22 million. We built Papago, and we are still using those remaining funds to maintain the rest of the district. And of course, you've seen the stories multiple times in terms of what's happened to capital funding. You know, we're dealing with probably a quarter of the capital funding that we used to receive. So without those bonds, I think you
Yeah.
literally be using duct tape.
I'm down to the very tail end of the bond.
So that was the original plan, that we would use those dollars to build a new school. The other thing we've looked at is how far does your dollar go, right? So as the architects have told us, it's based on how many walls you build, right? So for every building, you're increasing costs on a campus. If you build one big square block and you put everything in, you're going to reduce the cost. So if you look at doing For example, let's say that the most needy areas at Monte Vista, or not Monte Vista, but Mackin are the Bailey wing, the wing that floods every time it rains, which is a newer wing.
Those
but-
are modulars.
Yeah, that floods every time it rains, and we literally put sandbags on the door. And the cafeteria. Just replacing those classrooms alone, Roy has estimated that if we built like a square box, 2 stories, to replace those classrooms, we'd be at
With
4.5 to
demolition,
5.
yeah, 4.5 by
5
with the demo.
million just to do that without the cafeteria. So the reality is if you look at the building of a new building on each campus, probably we're not gonna get the bang for our buck that we would hope to get. It would cost us more in the long run. So those are things that to consider, but those are, but I still think it's valuable to take a look at what those priorities are on each campus.
Yeah, but I hear Dr. Wagner saying it's like the Cox commercial bundle and you get more for your money, and it's true. If you do a whole site, you will actually save money by doing a whole site other than building sections all over the district.
So we will put that together.
Thank you.
And I think also by having done what we used to do, we have a whole lot of facilities where you drive by and they're facilities that are 60 years old and the front office is 20 years old, and people think, well, why do you need money for that? That's, people who haven't actually stepped on campus. I kind of feel like, I don't want to say that we've been putting lipstick on a pig, but if you're using duct tape, Roy's probably got some lipstick and some pigs out there.
Bailey wire too.
Yeah. So I guess I think our idea was with the facilities committee, and maybe some people, maybe it wasn't unanimous among every single one of those people who ever participated, but that if we were able to stick to this schedule, if we were able to go out and bond each time, and we've had a pretty good history of getting bonds in this district, that it's not all going to happen overnight, but within maybe as soon as 25 years, we could replace all of our older facilities with facilities that, in a cost-effective way, as was just mentioned, by doing the whole school, you have the entire school kind of on the same maintenance schedule, and you have that ability where kids can rotate, move within. You have a whole energy-efficient campus, and kids, when there's a lockdown, they can move within. If it's an external lockdown, move within the buildings. And so I thought that a lot of those things that we identified were right. I realize that there's probably pushback from, well, what does my school get from this? But my thought is that even if we do Mackin completely, we've still got money to meet some other pressing needs. And I know that without bond, if we didn't have any bond funds at all the last 5 years, we probably would have had to dig into M&O when there's an emergency, when there's a monsoon and a tree falls on something.
Yeah. And I think Roy would agree, but he's proven me wrong before. I don't think we, other than the situation at Mackin with the Bailey Wing and the flood zone, I don't think we don't have dangerous situations. We have situations that we can maintain, we can repair and keep nursing them along for a while, but I don't think we have to worry about a roof falling in or that type of thing.
Yeah, he's correct. Up until when the
I
SFB
told you.
cut money, we used to get $1,200,000 a year just in renewal monies to be able to maintain facilities, everything. In the last 4 years now, that's went away. I really get upset walking around my campuses, looking at my buildings and not being able to do what I know I need to do. But we do have safe, tight buildings because of the work we did when the students first came through. If it wasn't for that, we'd be...
Well, and the use of the bonds over the last 5
Yeah,
years.
and the bond money's helping us
replacing the roofs
right
and
now.
that stuff. So, anyway, it's a lot to maintain all of these facilities for sure. But Roy makes it sound like he's broke. He can squeeze the director of finance better than anybody. Gotta keep them going.
Somebody's got to have skills. Well, and I appreciate, everyone being willing to continue to bring more information. I mean, from my perspective, I want to make sure that we're doing a good job, spending the resources that we have. And if we are able to rebuild an entire facility and still keep up with the health and safety issues at the other campuses at the same time, then that's sort of win-win, I think.
And I think that was the goal.
And that's really the goal. That's clearly, the intent and the goal. I just want to make sure that it translates into practice that way. And then obviously, down the road when we do make a decision about spending the resources, one of the things that I'd like to, there's been conversations, not so much, we haven't had them yet, but this idea of right-sizing schools and understanding, what is the actual size of a newly built campus that we have to make. And, at that point, it's looking at what the current enrollment is of the existing campus and what do we need to build it out for, which obviously impacts the size and number of buildings that you're, building and so on. So I know that there's lots more conversations that we're going to have, but, I'm excited to.
The right sizing is a critical question, and, in our district, we've been used to running schools of 1,000 students. And most of us would choose not to have campuses of 1,000 students. And looking at, do you build a facility to address what the near future is going to look like in terms of enrollment with the plan in place for expansion if you had to. Part of the reasons we have used, our campuses are so spread out, is because there was no plan in place if you needed to grow, right? When I first came in this district, the district was in a decline state back then, and I think there were 4,500 students. We climbed all the way up to 8,500 students, and now we're sitting at about 6,700 students. So being able to be flexible enough that at any school, if the enrollment increased, that you would be able to, in a logical, planned way, add to that facility is a critical step.
And we did that at Papago. At this time, if we had to, we can, on the second story of Building D, which is the south building, we can put 4 classrooms up there.
Is that sort of off the wing,
Mhm.
or there's just
We're
the
ready
room?
for expansion, and that's 3 classrooms, 120, 150 kids. So we thought of that on Papago.
So what do we need to do to move forward with the facilities plan and with Mac? And do we need to bring this back as a future agenda item to vote on?
Yes,
I think
and
we
I
need
would
to
say,
first provide that additional information that was requested,
Okay.
and then probably have that
and I
agenda.
believe the second meeting in August would be the best because of Scott's involved.
Okay. Do you need a gold card, or you guys know what?
Probably we could wait.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I guess we're not supposed to talk about that. Well, it's related to this one.
Yes, it is.
I can fill one out if you need me to. I've got one ready right here.
Lots of detail.
This is
There's
when
not
we.
enough room on the gold card, Hilda. I need
Here's the back.
This is when we decide all our agenda items for the rest of the school year.
That's it.
just this one time.
Exactly.
Never.
That's it, get it right tonight.
Exactly. All right, if there's nothing more on this, we can move on to the solar agenda item.
Let me just briefly mention, with not a lot of
Okay.
specifics, that Scott had mentioned to us, and so did we get information from from BISFEED, that there was a referendum on bond indebtedness, and Scott had mentioned too that there was still some question out there in the community about the sale of bonds. And by the second meeting in August, we should know more about that. And it also seems to me that there was a time frame of when bonds could be sold, and to this point, I think it was like around August 15th.
What we said.
Do what?
Are we ready for this agenda
Oh,
item?
yes, please do.
Mr. President, members of the board,